Time governs every part of our lives, but does it govern God? Welcome to the Curious Faith Podcast, where faith isn't the absence of questions, it's learning where to take them. Each episode, we tackle one honest question and seek a biblical, thoughtful answer. And so my name is Ryan Johnson, and I have two curious companions for today's episode. That is Jonathan Light and Dr. Michelle Shelton. So how are y'all doing today?
Doing well. I feel lacking because I'm the only one not a doctor here.
Jonathan, you're on your way, though.
Got a long way to go. Short time to get there.
It's about who you surround yourself with.
That's right.
True. That's very true.
Get up to y'all's level. There it is. See?
Let's see what Kristen has to say about that. So Michelle, do you want to read today's question?
Is God inside of time or outside of time or both?
Now, this question originally came at a youth event that I did in January of some students that I don't know if they were trying to stump me, but it was the high school boys, and they apparently had stayed up real late the night before talking about a bunch of stuff, and this was one of the questions there. But I actually did get this question from this past Sunday from a young boy as well, something very similar. And so, this is kind of one that kind of like the last episode about, or a couple episodes ago now, about if we could go back in time and, things like that. It's one of those things that whenever you're dealing with time, it seems like that it's so hard to process and think about it because we are creatures who are stuck in time. Just like the opening statement, like time governs our lives. We can't help but to think in the past and the present and the future. And if we get stuck in either the past or the future, we really have a hard time being present in the present, right? So it's, yet we're still bound to it. So time is just one of those things you can talk circles around, and it's just really difficult to imagine anything other than that. But I think that's where we have to just settle with something that is it's kind of a starting point for this question or this answer, and that is that time is something that is created. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think it's a social construct created by the government, to keep us. Wasn't that what you were saying, Jonathan?
But we didn't get that recorded, okay? You didn't have to bring my conspiracy theories into this.
Well, you weren't saying you believed it. You were just saying you heard somebody say it. Yeah. But yeah, it is one of those. Time is it is a construct in one sense. It is created. And so when you think about people are like, well, when was time created? And there's people who talk about the first chapter of Genesis when God said, "Let there be light." Light governs time for us, and so sun up, sun down. That's the day that really marks all of our lives. That circadian rhythm that we live in, and that's how we measure time. That's how we evaluate time. And so once again, as creatures who have memory, we have a memory of times past, and we think about times future. That's one of the things that distinguishes us as creation. And so time is something that's created. Well, if we think about time as something that's created, time has a creator. And if one of the principles of creation is that if God creates something, then he is apart from that. He transcends that. And so God created matter. So God is spirit. God, he created consciousness. And so God is the ultimate consciousness. There's ways that we are similar to him, but there's ways that he's totally beyond us. We get that from places like Deuteronomy 29:29. And so time is the same. Right? God being omnipresent, he is not just in all places, he is at all times. He is outside of time, meaning that he is past, he sees the past, he sees the present, he sees the future, and his knowledge of those things is perfect, and therefore he is both completely distinct from time, yet because he's the creator, he can interject himself into time. He can be transcendent from it. He can be present in it. And And so his plan includes the creation of image bearers with whom he would interact with, who exist in time. That's us, right? And so as God exists in Trinity, he's also a multidimensional being, which is the part where you say those words and people are like, ooh, you know. But that is the spiritual realm. That's another dimension that we can't see. And so there's no better example of that than the incarnation of Jesus, where God is in eternity, and yet he is in his Son. He is present in time as a human being. And so God does exist in time, but God is also outside of time. And so that's the diplomatic answer to that. It's yes, he's both, right? And so does that make sense? Is there any thoughts that y'all have about that?
So I think that to think about time, you also have to think about space. Yeah. So I don't think you can think about time and space away from each other, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think when people think about how can you be both in time and see time, if you think about, hey, the further we go away from Earth, we can actually see backwards in time because of the way that light travels through space. Well, that has already happened on Earth, but if we're observing it from the Hubble telescope or further back, and those of you who actually work for NASA, please don't, get mad at me if I get these wrong. But so they're like, well, it's already happened. So how can you interject yourself into that scenario? Because you're watching something that's already been recorded. And I think it's really interesting because that's putting a spin on it that we can't understand. There are, and those of you who know me, like for me to say there's things your mind can't understand, you're probably like, she's crazy. But there are things that we are not designed to understand. So the universe is expanding. Well, naturally, our question is, well, what is expanding into? It's not expanding into anything. Our brains are not designed to really understand something that's infinite. And so then, you also think about, when we're moving around or we've got things that are holding us, light is interacting with particles that are in the room. And as you go into space, those particles get further and further apart, and we don't have gravity holding them together. Well, what's in between those particles? And that's just the way that our brain is designed to think about these things. And the answer is nothing and infinity.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we were Buddhist, we would say that that's God. Yeah. God is in between all the particles. And that's where we would say, no, God's distinct from his creation. He is not his creation. That's panentheism. And so when we understand the revelation that God is both omnipresent, speaking of time and space, and yet he also is transcendent as the creator of time, then he is distinct. And so, Jonathan, I'll pose a question to you, right? And he didn't see this one coming. But how does the fact that God is not in time as you pray to him, how does that impact your prayer life? Or how does that impact when he calls you to do something, the fact that he already knows past, present, and future?
That gives me security. If I am praying to him, I am trusting in his promises of the past to rely on them in the future. Like it says, he's already counted my footsteps. He's already placed those. So, and that's based off the promises of the past. That's how I can see the future. And he's outside of it. That gives me a security, not the fact that he's outside of it and he's distant. He's outside of it and he's near. Because the Holy Spirit's with us daily. Yeah. So that would be my.
That's good.
Super complex answer.
Well, that's the thing. That's where the beauty of the attributes of God are, and which is this idea of him being inside of time or outside of time, is an attribute of God that it should provoke both awe, which is what you're talking about, Michelle, and security as we exercise our faith in those promises in his word. And so that's just one of those ways that we can get very practical with a very complex question. And I think y'all both have done a great job of stoking my curiosity, as somebody who's wondering, how are people going to, they might see the title of the episode and be like, skip that one. And so, but once again, you see how it can be extremely practical and relevant.
Well, and piggybacking on that, the question that comes is, hey, what does that have to do with free will? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that comes into it. Well, I'm going to shout out to Mr. Dwayne Thomas, who in our BFG class said that it's like if someone tells you the score of a football game, you know how it's going to end, but you haven't seen it. You don't know what plays are going to happen. Like, how did we get to that ending? And I thought that was a pretty good
There you go.
It's a good analogy.
Shout out to Wayne.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what BFG is, though. That's creature stuck. Speaking of creature stuck in time,
what's the new term?
We just call them small groups. But listen, I don't throw stones because once again, that's the reason that BFG that we create.
What was BFG? What does that stand for? I knew what it was.
What do you think it stands for?
Bible Fanatic Group.
You're
close.
really close. You're
Bible
really close.
Fellowship Group.
And that was the point. Like old church growth models were like, hey, name it something unique to break it out of people's expectations of Sunday school, And so anyway, I was like, a couple, I guess probably, I don't know, a year and a half ago, I was like, let's just call them all small groups and challenge people to get involved in small groups. But I love it. I love it because it shows the power of that principle of like, call it something different. And it sticks in Michelle's mind,
You don't like NETMA?
And the NETMA. Oh, yeah. That was what the loop was called when I got here. The NETMA. What did it stand for?
No one ever tells me anything.
I like that.
Isn't that good?
I like that.
We should just go back to that. I should be like, Cheryl, let's go back to the NETMA. Yeah, that was another one of those.
I'd like to be a fly on the wall when you tell her that.
She'd shoot me a look. Well, this has been a very riveting and a blast from the past episode in some ways of the Curious Faith podcast. And so if today's episode helped you, then share it with a friend who might be asking the same question. What is BFG and what is the NETMA? And if you got a question that you'd like featured on a future episode, then email us at questions@curiousfaithpodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. This podcast is sponsored by Agape Baptist Church. You can learn more about Agape and our outreach ministries through the Community Care Village by visiting our website and seeing how you can get connected. And so until next time, stay curious and keep growing in the faith.